friends, batchmates, everybody into the auditorium so we can begin the second session.
I got Andrew Prasad's book. Fun it was. I'm also kind of surprised because even though he's Sneha's student, there's still a very like 1+1 wala approach to it in a good way.
Prasad.
Ah.
on a smaller side and not go for a very large side, because it also depends on the time you have to spend building and designing the nitty-gritties of the space. So now moving to the design process. Through these learnings, I went back to my research and listed down the spaces which were the most social on the site. So one was the common toilets, which became the most social spaces for friendships to grow. The mori, or the washing space, which is now almost vanished in today's kind of housing, became social spaces especially for women to come together to spend time. The corridors and courtyard-like open spaces during evening became spaces of repose and recreation, and during the day became spaces for work. And lastly, but importantly, stepping out of the house just to throw garbage became an act of pause, generating friendships and frictions among the residents. So moving ahead, because it was a mass housing scheme, one of the main things that I learned was that it was always good to strategize from the unit, then to the cluster, and then to the larger mass housing scheme. And because mine was a low-income housing project, I particularly had to design one unit and then use repetitively, because it has to be an equal square feet area for everyone. So I'll walk you through the house. So the housing unit is designed such that you enter the house from this notch area, and you reach a common space shared by all the three rooms. Opposite to the entry room is the bath and the WC areas, and to your right is the cooking space. So the bathroom and the cooking, adjacent to the bathroom, I introduced the washing balcony, which then becomes an offset to the service balcony. And also this small intervention becomes a very important intervention, as these are large households in tight rooms. So it allows the household task to actually become more comfortable because of the collapsible doors that allow the bathroom to expand and even the kitchen to expand during different kinds of scenarios. Next, I repeat this individual housing unit twice to create a cluster of three houses that share a common corridor, or courtyard-like corridor on the ground floor, and corridors which then get designed on the upper floor, thereby creating double height spaces. So, okay, so now a few points that I learned was that moving ahead to the larger scheme, what I tried to do was I color-coded my cluster, the red being the entry and the cooking space, the blue being the bathroom, and the yellow being the multipurpose room. So I repeated this cluster to create a mass housing scheme to understand what kind of larger open service courtyard it was allowing me, and what kind of smaller degrees of openness that it was giving me. So I also tried out, along with the scheme of 3, I tried out a scheme of 4, but what was the problem that I faced here was that the scheme of 4, since being more structured, it always closed down the areas into houses of 4 together and had left no room for smaller nooks and corners for intimate spaces to take place. Now the problem with this thing, the 2D planar arrangement, was that because it was planar, I hardly had any idea to understand how it was working in a 3-dimensional format, and I was not able to grasp the scale. So what are the shadows that are actually happening? How tight is the space, or how big is the space? I needed an appropriate space to maintain the ideas. So I'm actually very lazy to make physical models in general. So I always jump from 2D to direct 3D because I find it more convenient to actually work out on a digital space. But here, particularly, I was finding it very difficult because every time I was not able to grasp the scale even in the 3D, a digital format, because I was not able to understand the shadows, etc. So my mentors eventually told me that make a physical massing model. It will take time at the start, but eventually it will help you to understand the kind of spaces you're making. So again, I color-coded my unit with the kitchen entry, the bathroom, and the multi-purpose room. And then the moment I started to stack, earlier I had an idea that I'm stacking it one above the other. But the moment I was able to stack it physically, I understood that I could flip the houses, which created a veranda for the ground floor and a balcony on the above floors. And at the same time, when I was stacking, I realized that my corridors were then becoming these huge 10-meter long light wells. And they were very dingy. So then I was able to sculpt out corridors such that it created double height spaces one below the other and afforded and it allowed me to thicken the corridors and spaces and thin it accordingly. So then for the next 1.5 months, I was actually juggling with spaces, trying to understand what is more of a good space in terms of service and courtyards that could allow me. So I made tons of iterations. I created a site plan, and then I would simply shuffle my blocks every day to see. And the moment I found out that okay, this plan might be working to a certain extent, I would take it to a 2D format on AutoCAD to see, and then you would find more technical errors there. So you come back here. So it is a very lethargic process, but it is very interesting to get into. So then the corridors started becoming more defined, wherein the plane, the double height, created regulated height, light and ventilation, broke the linearity, and itself took care of the interactions. So further, I also detailed out one of the clusters to actually see whether the socialities that I'm talking of are really working or it's still in this romantic idea that I'm living in. Okay. Now coming to the detailed study, going back to the story. Fast forwarding to 1 year post redevelopment of these stalls into a housing colony that operates on everyday infrastructures. Manohar has shifted back to this new housing colony with his family. On a Sunday morning, he returns to the market adjacent to the colony after buying fish for that day's lunch. As soon as he enters the colony, onto his left near the study pavilion, he waves at his daughter who's attending a NGO workshop for the children. The study pavilion sits on a large rainwater harvesting tank that harvests water for washing and cleaning for all the houses in the colony. Manohar decides to take the shaded path as an alternative path instead of going through the larger vehicular path in the middle of the housing colony. Now, one of the main reasons to create, I had like very particular site conditions that I had to work on, because this is a landlocked site and this becomes the only passageway for the slum dwellers to travel across. I needed to think for them also. So giving a larger path open for traversing across became a very important issue. And then because there are like these slums across, like sticking to the site itself, there needs to be an offset that needs to work in terms of fire, etc. So, and luckily on my site, on this offset, I had like a range of trees that were happening. So that came on to my design as a very good benefiter, wherein I was able to spill in my compost gardens across these spaces. So Manohar decides to take an alternative shaded path from building 1, 2 and 3 to reach his own building here. Coming ahead these are the plans and okay. So in the first building, the men in the first building have got together to hang a large lantern for their building. The electrical connection for the common lanterns is taken from the common street lamps that are particularly designed for the housing colony, which hold these plug-in spots for common gatherings such as ceremonies, wedding ceremonies, exhibitions, etc. to take place. The entire building here participates in the event through washing balconies, corridors, etc. Manohar waits here in a minute on the ground floor corridor and helps the men fixate the center position for the lantern. Further ahead of him is Sheila, who's drying out her clothes in the wire tied between two ends of the corridor columns. Sheila has fixed the time to dry the clothes now so that she can water the plants in the compost garden, as she has now developed a liking towards gardening. The men from around have actually formed their own music group, which already existed, but now have found a place to actually practice their own music. Now come together to jam on various songs. They're now practicing for the wedding in the Parab household. Here is where Vinu Abba actually loves to spend most of his time. The bridge connecting the two buildings on the terrace, from the terrace garden and the opposite building, overlooks the compost garden below and becomes a tranquil seating space, especially for the elderly who cannot always manage to walk downstairs or even come downstairs. Manu's sister is here to visit her for a month. She wanted to learn gardening, and thus Manu is teaching her how to take care of her own growing garden. The ones living on the upper floors then dispose of their waste into the compost gardens on the terraces, which are then all the compost gardens on the terraces on the ground floor grow vegetables and flowers that can be used on an everyday purpose. Manohar finally spots his building and sees a small crowd gathered near Suman Kaku's washing balcony around the ground floor. Today, Jagya and Nandu decided to harvest the vegetables from the compost garden, and since it's their day off, Suman Kaku, who was already busy filling buckets and tubs in the washing balcony, spotted them and called them immediately to inquire the harvest quality because it was their first harvest for the year. At the same time, the maintenance workers who then come to maintain the overhead water tanks the overhead water tanks then get designed such that it also becomes a space for repose for them in the hot sun, etc. So these are a few calculations of how the water tank would then work or operate on an actual basis. And at the same time, the idea of composting, how the compost bins would then can be used on an everyday basis where the residents come out simply to throw off their garbage, but at the same time, as it becomes an extension of their home, you start maintaining the garden yourself. So the overall design intervention is able to create a more inclusive and a more democratic space with respect to everyday service systems by not just looking at them as mere efficiency devices, but is able to also question our everyday practices of the society through the lens of class, difference and caste. It blurs the boundary between work and leisure and instead of treating them as separate entities.
Lovely ideas. Questions from the audience? Or has the lunch taken toll on everybody? Okay, we have some.
Firstly, I really liked how you focused on all the difficulties the low-cost housing people are facing, and I see a lot of things as being very sensitively, like the approach is taken care of that. So when we consider low-cost housing and the realistic things that also exist within the city, which is the government norms, the FSI. So when you gave so much space to the corridors, the non-livable spaces, so was that considered as a part of your design?
Yeah, so that is exactly the reason why I chose Mada Housing Colony, because they have these spaces allotted particularly for the low income housing groups. So alongside with this, Mada has a policy of showing a lot of amount of housing in one large building. So instead I propose a tweak in the overall norm stating that instead of actually allowing a large number of population into a building, you actually reduce the population to a certain number so that it will be helpful in order to create more sensitive spaces for everybody. And the plus point of choosing this site, particularly for me, when I chose it very sensitively, was that the housing was only going to be built for these 96 households, which was the remaining 6 housing, because the rest of the buildings were already built up and they were already not given. So this became as a new model that you could build better with less number of people.
So you rehoused all 96 in this?
Yes, yes.
Hello. So first of all, amazing drawings, and secondly, my question is like, firstly, we did not used to have such socializing space, such large balconies. There were like chabutras or common spaces between the houses that used to act like the common spaces, gathering spaces. But over the period of time, as we have tend to adapt to other Western countries and other Western traditions, we tend to socialize more in spaces that are designed for socializing, like outward spaces, not spaces nearby our home or residence. So don't you think that socializing in like design is not the problem, but the idea of socialization or adapting to Western trends is the issue where such spaces get ignored? Like in what I have experienced, like I was staying in a church. So firstly, there 10 years back there were spaces which were utilized like common corridors. People used to sit there, chat, play. But over the period of time, as the standard of living of the people have increased, such spaces become very vacated, and it has become difficult to walk through those streets also. So what is your take on this?
So I would not say that adapting the Western ideas is necessarily creating a problem as such, because these ideas of composting, rainwater harvesting have already been with us for a very long time. But I would rather say that the logics of actually deriving the new kinds of ways in which you convert them into efficiency making devices is the problem instead. And that is why what the thesis then tries to do is provide a much nuanced approach, wherein exactly what you were saying, that the idea wherein it's your house starts to spill. So the approach is such that your house spills into these new methods.
But my question was that the idea of privacy has taken more into people's head than the idea of socializing with your neighbors, like safety, privacy, all that comes into your mind first rather than socializing with your immediate people.
So there is the house for it, where you hold the privacy. But it does not mean that you, in terms to always cater to privacy, you restrict the sociality only to the house. But you also give or provide space for people to spill out. The moment you provide them space to spill out, the idea of privacy starts blurring by itself. You don't need to, people will not hold on to it very rigidly.
Ayush, there's here and there.
Hi. So first of all, it was a very great learning experience watching your presentation. I just wanted to know that, of course, you are just housing those 96 families, but did you have to study about the FSI and the projected population? Were those the factors that you were supposed to consider, or were they in your scope per se?
So actually I haven't added those slides in the presentation because I thought it was more of a design discussion thing. But the FSI, the area that needs to be allotted, etc., everything was taken care, and then the space was being designed. So these people are being allotted 225 square feet only. So keeping in mind 225 square feet for the house, I would provide that. But then I would take care that you can always provide corridors that can thicken. And just thickening the corridors by 2 meters, if you make it 3 meters, it creates a very big difference. Then instead of creating a straightforward railing, just affording a seat to the railing creates a much more difference. And then your corridor holds a very different kind of character compared to it. So how do you tweak these new norms with FSI and those kinds of things becomes a very important factor to then design.
Thank you.
Can we pass it here to the front?
Hello. Yeah, so I just wanted to reflect on the questions which have been asked according to the idea of the West and the Europe, which were coming up again and again. And also, I think it's not just because of the West or the she told that it's not because of the West or the Europe. The Europe has, I mean, Europe has beautiful public spaces. If we see the kind of, and this socializing has been the veranda, the idea of veranda and all has been along with us since a lot of time. So the kind of the difference is kind of made through the media or the image of the BHK, which has come in 2000s, around 2000s, where the idea of the mall or something which has a facade which breaks through, has a boundary which divides the inside and the outside, has come along. Otherwise, it was all along the nature of our space where this kind of Mada settlements has its own, and we were talking about this idea of FSI, which kind of was not there at the time when these kind of settlements were built around 1990s. So people kind of now, we have a lease, in Mada we have a lease for 100 years, lease on a 99-year lease. And the square feet area which is given to us is a 250 square feet room. And now people have been extending it to 2 floors, but that kind of is not legal in terms of the MHADA rules. But kind of their family has grown to another generation. Now the cars are coming along and the grounds have been filled with the cars and all. So how do we softly intervene into these issues and also take this Western or the European ideas? I mean, that's not the issue, and also like come back to how we can softly intervene. So yeah, that's it.
Like you had said at that time, aspirations
Yeah.
plus our general societal way of functioning in our local context. Any other questions, observations?
Thank you, Neha. That was a lovely narrative. And we move on to our third speaker. We have Ameya Thanawala from the Academy of Architecture.
Good afternoon to everyone present here. Firstly, I would like to thank LS Raheja and all the faculty members and the participating institutes to give this medium for us to interact with all the juniors and the students and the peers. My thesis topic is Urban Food Repository, which majorly deals with tackling food loss and waste by revitalizing wholesale markets. So there is an impending challenge of how are we going to feed an estimated population of 10 billion people by 2050. There have been numerous summits, numerous conferences, but this is one of the issues which is so real and so present amongst us and is kind of an elephant in the room. There are people at micro level doing things. Some people think that this issue, architecture does not play a major role in this issue, but politics or economics plays a major role in this issue. But once I started researching in this particular subject, I didn't have an idea of how extensive the network of food supply and chain is itself in our country, India itself. Currently, it is a very linear food supply chain from production to storage, handling, processing, distribution, and consumption. And there's no concept of post-consumption. The waste directly goes to landfill. I then actually went through a lot of FAO reports, ICAR reports, which were my major data collection and analysis sources to see the data amongst all the different continents. So each and every continent, according to its development, has different stats for each and every type of food loss or waste. So if we see in North America and Oceania, majority of food loss, or I would call food waste, happens in the consumption stage, where people are less ethical about wasting food, which is your cooked food. In countries like Sub-Saharan Africa and Southeast Asia, the major food loss and waste happens in storage, handling, processing, and distribution and marketing. Because I have seen majority of us Indians or Desi people, they are more ethical towards not wasting food. We are more ethical, we don't waste food easily. So where does this gap lie? So this is the exact link which is there between the farm gate and market gate level, which was my thesis, major thesis intervention. So the idea is to create an integrated food distribution and marketing typology, which is circular in nature and a productive link between production and consumption stages, which is actually technologically upgraded, makes adept use of waste, and is an interactive space in the public realm. So I started with locating a lot of these wholesale markets which are there in the Mumbai metropolitan region itself. I also actually went to Nashik and even Ahmedabad and Surat to see various wholesale markets, but I was most comfortable with Mumbai as I've been brought up here. And I know many of these markets in Thane, Mulund or Vilaypale, BMC, APMC Vashi, APMC Kalyan. And majorly, the reason for me to choose my site of APMC Vashi is that it is one of Asia's largest wholesale food market, and it is the prime source through which the food from all the different parts of our state or country passes through this particular APMC to Mumbai or all the wholesale markets. Earlier it used to be Crawford, then Baikala market, Dadar market, but now the center has been shifted to Vashi APMC. And it has a lot of different markets also under it: spice market, fruit, vegetable, or grains market. Upon macro analysis of the site, I realized that Navi Mumbai has itself been planned on the basis of residential regions, industrial regions, commercial regions. But there's a stark division between industrial and residential zone, which leads to a very monotonous build form in the majorly industrial zone where the APMC is situated. Also, a lot of these buildings have underutilized FSI, so an FSI of about 1.4, which is permitted, is hardly being used here. Subsequently, I actually went on selecting fruit and vegetable market as my delineated site area, because a lot of comment that I got from cross juries and reviews is to delineate and define my scope. What is the food typology? What is the nature of the food that you are looking at? It can be cooked food, it can be raw food, it can be perishable, it can be grains. So majorly in this area, the reason for me selecting this particular market is definitely because it has perishables, which is much difficult to store for a longer time. Secondly, there is about 30 to 33% of food loss which is happening currently in perishables. And at the same time, the structures in this market are C1 and C2B category dilapidated structures. So it needed a rapid examination, and there is a lot of illegal tenements also which have been built upon the market, as you can see in these images. Similarly, I then started with micro site analysis too. And the strength of the site was its spaciousness, the amount of space that the site had, the modular stalls. And the weakness was there was no proper vehicular segregation, there was no proper light and ventilation into these structures. So what I realized is that food loss and waste can have direct causes, which we know. But a lot of architectural or space qualities lead to indirect loss of food, which includes handling of food, packaging of food, the way it is loaded, unloaded, the way services are carried in a structure can also ultimately determine how the worker well-being is there in the space and how the worker is actually treating or handling the food there. So this majorly led to user classification and studying the users at the most. So this, I also read one theory known as hedonistic sustainability by B.R. Kingles, and in that theory he mentions something called as pragmatic utopia. So practical approach, people will always try to achieve a very practical world, a very something which is very direct. What is needed would be the intervention. Utopia, at the other hand, is something which is very ideal, which is something we have not achieved. And pragmatic people often they don't agree with the utopian idea. So what I actually tried to do with this thesis is to achieve a balance between pragmatism and utopia. So I'll explain what pragmatic approaches are there and what utopian approaches I have taken. So majorly worker health and recreation, expansion of business, gender equity, which the market is currently male dominated, so that, and user diversification is what I was looking at. Wholesale shop owners are looking at expanding their business, getting more cold storages, going for exports. There is a lot of cartelism also which is happening in the market. Then sellers and middlemen are looking to increase their sales, getting more storage, getting more POS points, building more relationships. Hamals and Mathadis are actually one of the most exploited class in the market, where they are, there's high dependency on them, but at the same time 90% of them fear the loss of job if they are absent for even a single day. Also, one of the interactions that I had with a laborer was that I just asked him, what do you do for your work and how is it going? So he's saying कि मजा नहीं आता है, but अभी करना है तो करना पड़ रहा है. So something like these, where people are not enjoying working in that environment. Then at the same time, 9 out of 10 workers are facing heat exhaustion. Issues like malaria, dengue are very prominent in such marketplaces. And for household buyers, visitors and customers like us, it is very difficult to maneuver through the market also for something which is so essential. And at the same time, the sanitation and sanitary facilities are also not up to the mark. I then also studied the market timetable because it is extremely essential as they function nocturnally. That is from 1 a.m. to 1 a.m. to 11 a.m. in the morning or till the noon. So then I tried to create these three pillars, which are environmental model, an economic model, and a social model, in which existing market and its inventory, which was missing, is proposed. But at the same time, can there be plug-in facilities within the market, like a public interface where public can interact with the food, with the market interface, a food bank and processing zone, which actually creates waste to wealth products from the market, a resting and recreational space for all the type of user categories, and a multifunctional space. So this was the existing site, a very linear site, modular site. I first tried to create, orient my space in a way that there is wind flow, ample wind flow, natural light and wind flow through the space, and then created two dedicated vehicular movement and a central pedestrian spine. This is then I started sculpting out the space. So here actually I spent a lot of time on site itself. And all these design ideas actually came to me on site, because I had initially started with a very rectangular grid and a very rectangular courtyard spaces. But what happened was that it was taking a lot of unwanted niches and nooks. So I wanted to avoid that to create a very seamlessly flowing sculpting spaces. This is then coupled with program zoning and massing, where ground is a existing market, which also has a lower ground component. Then first floor has incremental market, and second floor has components like bio tower zone, which is a public interface, women's economia, which is a processing zone solely operated by women, auction hall, which is a multi-purpose space located in the center of the fruit and vegetable market, which can be easily accessible from fruit and both vegetable markets, and the labor rest house and recreational space with basic amenities like dispensaries, health facilities, barber shops, etc. Further, I went into form exploration, which took a lot of cues from the climatic consideration, whether to keep open forms, inviting forms, large space grid forms. So all that guided my design. And a lot of detailing went also to facade and landscape detail, where I actually studied all the solar orientations and angles, and then designed my facade. So this is the view of the bio tower as it projects onto the street. This is a typical upper ground level floor, where we can see the typical market section and interspersing courtyards with a pedestrian plaza at the entry, and two different market squares and courtyards. Also, the market square has a retail zone. So a lot of these informal zones actually start happening outside the street if they are not catered within the market premise. So this particular street is actually congested with all the informal retail vendors. So a space for that was provided at the center, centrally located, so that it is easy to come take the food and then go back. Similarly, an amphitheater and resting canteen spaces were created along this spine, which has diurnal usages from central amphitheater to an interactive public space. Lower ground level had majorly all the services. At the same time, some food which doesn't, fruit and vegetables which don't require natural light or ventilation. For example, you can't keep leafy vegetables here in a lower ground level because it requires ventilation, water spraying. So accordingly, those spaces were planned. At the same time, a 250 metric ton of rental micro cold storage was proposed here, as it is very difficult and expensive for wholesale owners to go to a larger cold storage vendor or a facility. Similarly, market stalls were increased by 40% in its stall size, and a distinct visitor aisle and a service aisle was created, such that the movement difference between the visitors and the laborers, it is not interrupted, and the visitors have more time to negotiate or look for the right choice of the vegetable, while this is a more faster mode of transportation. Similarly, a market stall has its own incremental mezzanine space, which can be used for surplus storage, and there would be a dedicated parking space for a mobile vehicle for all the vendors to actually, all the laborers and mathadi workers to use such simple yet technologically effective solutions to reduce burden on their own health. At the same time, a futuristic mechanical transportation and cart delivery system was devised across the service aisles here in the loading-unloading zone. So the idea was to have a system in which you place order and it is directly transported to your parking spot. So I actually initially had these loading and unloading mechanical trolleys in the service aisle here also. But then over the period of time, like I negotiated with my guides and we came to a conclusion that it might be too technologically advanced for an APMC market. So right now let's keep it here. But what I've tried to do is keep a provision in such that there is the desired height or desired length for this system is provided in the service side. So in the future, at any time, if they want to install this system, they can surely do so. Similarly, some wholesale markets have a radial layout for users who, for wholesale shop owners who require lesser space but want to expand in future. So for that, similarly, mezzanine expansion is made. At the same time, recreational spillouts are made across this part, such that the mundane journey through a market is also solved. An auction hall is a multi-purpose space through which various configuration of wholesale buying and selling and event spaces can be done. Coming to bio tower, I have actually radially shaped a helix composting tower, which is actually 8 TPD in its capacity. So even I was struggling with deciding all the capacities for waste management. So what helped me actually was to go through Mumbai APMC's online portal and Griha, you must have heard of Griha. They have thumb rules and calculations for waste quantification. So that was something which really helped me to quantify the waste, and accordingly I designed all these systems. This is the view of biotower and step terraces. So the idea of biotower is that you grow food, you cook food in a cafe, you eat them. So growing can be in natural terms or controlled environments like hydroponics, aquaponics, and then you compose the food here and the soil again goes to the terrace. It's a very small public interface module. I didn't make the entire structure like that. Again, because of pragmatic utopia where I have to see the practical implications of the same, who is going to maintain such a large area. So these interventions are based on that. Coming to processing zones, which is located on second floor. So again, there is a food bank and donation receiving zone and women's economy, which is a processing zone. So there are various waste to wealth innovative products and programs which can be developed, like edible cutlery is there, then cottage industries are there. Then making building blocks out of food waste is also a technique. And finally coming to labor rest house. So these are the sections actually highlighting diurnal variations in space and how I've arranged it, having larger public spaces looking outwards, while larger processing areas or resting areas, recreational spaces looking inwards. Also in terms of material, I used bio brick, which is made of agro waste, banana stem veneers, which are actually made from banana stem waste and can be used to coat for interior decoration. And a lot of low VOC, high SRI materials were used to look into mitigation of urban heat island effect. Then these were my modules, structural modules, because I wanted it to easily be constructed. So it was designed in that way, and details for the same. Even in terms, since I mentioned I had an interest for post-design evaluation, so I had selected Griha as my base evaluating source, and I had evaluated my entire design. So these are some of the decisions that I've taken from construction management, water management, energy management. So I have designed the entire thing in 3 phases, and how the structure would come in place with the existing structure was there. Similarly, vegetation cover and vegetational analysis was done. Energy performance index, then water performance index, water balance diagrams, waste management system. So how it is actually segregated at source, then conveyed to a waste management zone, then taken to either processing zone or vermicomposting or an off-site located biogas plant. So all this chain of how waste is managed throughout the facility. Finally, I also did an analysis of how there is an increase in sale component from the existing built-up area to the new built-up area. There is an increase in sanitation facilities, there is increase in market function and diversification of that function, which was earlier like 92% was just market and 8% were utilities. And now about 35% of area has been dedicated to recreational facilities, processing areas, and increased sanitation facilities. So to conclude, there was always this doubt that I had whether I should create plug-in facilities or redevelop the entire thing. So currently, because of my site opportunity, because it was a dilapidated structure, I have redeveloped it. But what I also learned is that each of these programs can be used as a plug-in facility to other wholesale markets. Like one of the idea was if biotar is used as a plug-in apparatus and continued across all the APMCs which are present there. So imagine the industrial area, which is a monotonous build form, now has these plug-in where to a certain extent the population from residential area or other nodes can also come visit, interact with that particular infrastructure. So these were some ideas. At the same time, I learned how to optimize structure, and my major takeaway was also doing evaluation of the design with respect to all the services and management related things. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much. Amay, thanks a lot. We go on to questions. Okay, while everybody is warming up, meanwhile, what was your first, when you approached your guide with a topic, what was the first thing you said? You wouldn't have obviously said APMC market, right? You probably said something to do with food.
Yeah, like it was not very concrete, as in it was not architectural in that sense.
Exactly.
So it was something I had actually a very sense of longing that I want to do something related to this. So in my semester 4, actually there was architecture theory and we were supposed to create manifestos. So I was convincing my group, like, let's take this topic, let's do this, but none of them actually did that. So it ended up being that, but subconsciously somewhere I had this key, something related to food I want to do. And I'm actually very much intrigued into waste and waste management also.
Okay.
So it was not something key, food and celebration is the topic that I want to do.
Okay.
I was clear that I want to do something related to food waste. But then, like I started researching, there are rural approaches, peri-urban approaches, urban approaches, and then typologically also there are different approaches. So currently, actually, with my guide, I'm working on a research paper where we are, apart from markets, we are studying plug-in facilities which can be applied to residential, commercial, hospitality areas at very small level. But at the so initially, actually, I was also looking at plug-in facilities, but the same thing that was told to me that plug-in facility might be too small for a thesis. Scale-wise, exactly. So then I was looking at larger interventions and larger zone. Then my guide told me to keep an open mind, look at things. So I also did some rural, like at rural farm gate level, I did some research. But to be honest, like I would have required more time, I feel, to study the rural farm gate approach to give justice to that design. So that's why then we shifted to an urban approach, a peri-urban approach, and then I studied various markets. So actually Surat APMC has waste to wealth processing facilities, and it is able to generate up to 2 crores per month revenue just from mango juice making juice out of mango. So it is something which can be done, and I think the APMC would really benefit from it.
Very interesting.
Questions? Pass it.
The question I had for you was, the understanding we have of APMC markets is that it is primarily for wholesalers coming there and buying consumables in a very large quantity, ideally. And then those wholesalers end up becoming a middleman to greater parts of the city, which adds on to the convenience because people don't have to travel longer distances. But the way you've established more spaces for smaller groups trying to sell to the everyday man, the APMC market's purpose per se is getting a little diluted. What would you say about that? Because
so no, actually, retail has been looked as a plug-in facility in the market squares or the courtyards. The entire market is still wholesale, and out of I have intervened for 500 stalls, existing stalls. I have proposed 610 stalls with 40% more area. Because I was able to do this because I redeveloped the structure. If it was a plug-in facility, I would have to look at a different approach, obviously. But obviously, the priority has been given to wholesale market itself because it is what it is. So I have not changed.
Do we need such an elaborate wholesale market?
So the thing is, this is exactly what like I used to debate with myself, and the design output which has come, we can even take parts of that and apply it to a wholesale market. But this is something, while I was discussing that pragmatic utopia, this is what I tried to cover for the Vashi APMC market if it was to be redeveloped, because the structures are C1 and C2B grade structures. So all these facilities can be integrated into market. So actually, there is something called as mega food parks, which are located, which are about 23 in the country. So they have similar programs, but at very large scale, like 110 acres and 100 acres. But the issue is that they are still not working or operating as they were intended, because there are deficiencies at market gate level and farm gate level. So these facilities are required for the market, and hence have been proposed.
Of course.
You have addressed the problems that you have addressed right now. Okay, I'm partially on page with you on this. But are we talking about the real problems that wholesale markets? I mean, I am a visiting faculty at Koper Khermi. I mean, I run through Vashi APMC quite regularly. Most of the traffic jams are caused by APMC traffic. Driving around in APMC is a problem. So, have you delved into, the capacity of your new intervention, reducing that problem outside its borders?
So I have not delved into an urban level intervention for this particular project, but I have catered to the future projections with its terms of increased number of parking spaces and increased number of the wholesale market stalls. So that I have taken into consideration. But at an urban level, I have only looked into how people are interacting with the market or the wholesale owners and their aspirations towards APMC market. But congestion is a point that I think I've missed out.
Any more questions? Thanks, Amay. Thank you so much.
And we now move on to the last speaker for today. We have architect Shantanu Mure from Kribia.
Okay, I'll hold it closely. Cool. So my thesis topic is architecture through regional phenomenology. After discussing this whole presentation, I'll tell you how I got to this topic and how the thing went through. Okay, then it's been 75 years, maybe more that we have been an independent country in the South Asian context, and we are still struggling to form an architecture language in terms of how we deal with form making and such. So my investigation was because of the economy crunches and everything, we do find that these collages appearing in all over India, like not even first year city, second year, or even villages, and say that these monoliths are being made, which has no relation to the intervention of timeline in which, as a civilization, we have come in today. So there is no sense of how this product we are making today as an artifact has no relation to what we were, or even not looking out into the future. It's just a product which holds that it gives the economical solution in some way. And So my investigation was how can form making as a process, we can, as a civilization, we make architecture which somehow relates to what has become to the past, what we have become from the past, and still looks into the future. So I went through relevant texts like from Aldo Rossi, Architecture of the City, Locus, Collective Memory, the intangible and tangible aspects of the city as such, and how artifacts have been, like, this is just a theory that he proposed, in which the Italian architecture gave. And Louis Kahn, when abstracting ideas from Bulgarian forts, or even when making the Sher-e Bangla assembly in Bangladesh, he took references from water, and the tectonic vocabulary kind of had shared in his mind and everything. So that form making was derived from that. Even Norbert Schultz talked about it, now that how can you define two locations in space? Like how are they different, not in terms of not the tectonic value or the physicality of the place, but the spiritual or the experiential quality of the place and such. So he named this, he also introduced genius loci, the intangible quality of a geographical space in time. Then Kenneth Frampton in his critical regionalism theory talked about how Alvar Aalto kind of blended his building from. So the modernism movement was quite different in every European country as such, and also in India. But how Alvar Aalto kind of set his foundation from taking abstract theories from Finnish landscapes and abstracting them into forms, blending the building into the landscape in some way so that it belongs to that location in some way. After graduating from AA, returning from London, Raj Reval kind of like he and his friends went on to tours in India, and they got their so-called toolkit, which he then fused with the technicality of whatever the market could offer him, and then made institutes which are beautiful and which are abstracted in some way, kind of having this product which was relating to what the past has to say, but still looking into the future. Tadavando, again, not a trained architect, but has a Zen philosophy how the building relates to the landscape and the Japanese way of building, expressed as ways in contemporary materials in glass, concrete, and steel. And B.V. Doshi, in his finding identity for Indian architecture in some way, when got the IIM commission, he spent 5 years designing it. So he kind of made that like how building can be climatically sensitive, but also merging it with the local landscape directly. And even in his studio Sangat, he merged water and how the intangible qualities of what you want to abstract it from various temples and layering of cities. So this thesis was like, okay, I have now learnings from how these guys researched around and how these guys abstracted forms. Okay, so I chose my site to be Fatehpur Sikri Fort, and it's near Agra. So it was like going to that site, like and then making my own learnings, what I get, maybe tangible, intangible, and then forming my toolkit for making architecture and using that into that space. So basically, it could be done in any site, but I chose heavily architecture, I don't know, ancient marvel, which helped me to abstract it easily. But the main thing was that in any location you can go there, you can take your research in any way, and then that research will lead you to a form making process which is specific to that location. So, yeah. So, during traveling for the Sikri Fort around, capturing the views, maybe how the landscape and the soft red sandstone, how it merges, the weight of how the entrance was kind of worked out, how the build form softly sits onto the landscape, how the soil has been sculpted. So I have also, for the sake of making the book, I've made partitions of how things were made. Again, relation to the sky, how solid and void works out, mapping out landscape around the city and making some kind of a weight diagram of how enclosure work on your body. Then shaping light, be it winter or summer light. In winter light, how you experience a layering of objects when they blur out and these surfaces are made. And yeah, how the summer light kind of works in. So when the summer light is quite interesting. I went during summer and also in winter. During summers, now that was not the red sandstone shaping the space, it was the light which was shaping it. So I was tracing light and not so I kept it arbitrary how the boundary is going to work out and mapped around how the thing could, I don't know, some sort of a way to map it so that I can extract some stuff for the building I want to propose. Then how water was channelized. So this is pretty technical. So you collect the water from the top of the ridge and you take it down to an aquifer in some way, and which somehow relates to the wall. Somehow there's a spout which comes out. Somehow it becomes a dance floor for the Anup Talav, and it's directed down. The movement through follies of how this monolith structure kind of you help yourself navigate through having these red marks, these projections, which kind of help you to navigate through. And this intimate encounters that you, of course, experience sense of touch, the texture of water on the earth and stone and everything. Experiencing weight again, mapping that through. During this point, I didn't know whether it's going to be relevant or not, but it did help me to make a toolkit of mine for this specific place, which then I thought that okay, I have this data, then how do I make it into a physical entity? So I thought that okay, maybe you take follies one, you take light, you make a matrix, a system, you juxtapose it together and it comes off of a model. Then maybe I'll see what happens later. I'll maybe stitch it to make my building happen. So various matrix kind of have come in relating to the different research that we have discussed earlier. And then this matrix kind of give me model based on interaction of the material, light, maybe water, weight working together, sculpting landscape and maybe, stuff like that, follies working together. And this is my plan which came into it. And these things were then assigned function or then tweaked to what function I wanted, and then to stitch them together to make I don't know, an experiential quality of circulation when you move throughout the complex. So the function became arbitrary in that way, and it was futile to talk about it because I never talked about the function of what that building needs. But the thesis, you have to give it a function. The building has to be functional. So I made a museum at the bottom of the ridge, adding to this Buland Darwaza. This is the conventional way of traveling to the fort complex. And then when you exit it, there's Dark Bungalow, there's a British building here. People don't usually go there. I introduced the route there. Then when you move down, you enter the museum complex. So it's the permanent museum, there's a temporary museum aligned to it, auditoriums, workshop spaces, and Archaeological Survey of India office, there's a library, and restaurant, kiosks, and stuff like that. So basically, these all stuff you'll see in the plans. I'll run you through the plan briefly, and I'll tell you what it is. So when you enter, there's a fusion of landscape and water which is coming out. The red sandstone kind of, I don't know how it's clear for the back people, but there was an existing stone on the side, how Joffrey Bauer Alvar do it, framing it into a wall, I did that, then coming out, capturing light, then water. I have a separate diagram for water later on. Again, existing ruins were also there, which had to be anchored in some way in the movement, then captured through the landscape, stuff like that. And yeah, this is a water diagram which I made of channelizing water into an aquifer, which could be used for the building. And yeah, this is an illustration for it. Dividing it into 4 sectors and then challenge it, and because some regions were as quarried. After independence, people got nuts and took out stones from there. So yeah, that was pretty bad. And yeah, I kept in mind that in some way, the contemporary materials, I didn't want to do the traditional way of being, because in some way I want to respond to the timeline I'm doing today and look into the future. So yeah, use of steel, concrete, and then what you will say, playing with stone to capture light at some region where the skylight is coming in or wherever it's needed experientially. the steel works frame, how it sits lightly with the whole structure. Then sculpting in, having a skylight, sitting room. And yeah, this is how it blended into the mass, putting it up and down. So maybe this is the watch tower which was here.
Okay.
And yeah, cool.
Okay. But you were going to tell the audience something.
Okay, so I wanted to do this masti. I don't know how. I told my guide I want to draw. I read this Louis Kahn ka book. One of the students kind of compiled it about Kahn, in which he just went to. This idea fascinated me. I went to Sonal and I told her that, Sonal, I want to travel and I want to draw like he did in some way. And she's like, okay, but you have to draw a narrative or something. How are you going to come up with? So I was thinking, how would I fix that thing? So yeah, a lot of time when I read the juries, it was not only that how will I come up with a site and how that thing, but yeah, somehow it all stitched together.
So how did you stitch it together?
And it was more like finding a site where you want to abstract your stuff. Then I thought about which places I've been through from my childhood. And then Mandu, Aurangabad, Fatehpur Sikri, luckily. So yeah, and then I thought like this is a beautiful thing and I want to go about it. So that's all. No specific reason for it.
Okay. That was a very interesting presentation, Shantanu. Questions? There should be a lot of questions.
Stop hiding the process.
Okay.
Tell us how you stitched it all.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to ask you.
Okay.
Tell us how you did it together.
Nation needs to.
Yeah. So the sketches, if suppose this is relation to sky, okay. So the sketch is not clear enough, but yeah, relation to sky, how the redstone is coming out of me, that I took. Maybe there's the water diagram that I took, that the proportions of the building that I took. Now you take this matrix. Now this model, where did it go? This one, yeah. This relates to that. And then it reflects in the view, and that is what we get. So it was like I pinned it up on a tag board, and then I thought, okay, this is the program I want to work with, and then I thought of, okay, this can be worked in here. Okay, library of light. Okay, how can I use light? Or do I need to justify light? People need light to read. But okay.
Okay.
Things like that.
So during your research period,
Yeah,
like 9th semester,
yeah.
what were you doing at that time? You were reading all of that. You
Yeah, I
mentioned.
was searching for a particular process that how these architects design their own buildings. So, I mean, Kenneth Frampton, like he gave an example in his modern architecture book about Alvaro Alto, Rajreval, Geoffrey Bawa, Tadawando. So I was learning from the beginnings, okay, this is what the background was, this is how they went about. So basically, most of the clues I got was from people who did not conventionally do architecture. So their toolkit is to go about the world and take inspiration and abstract in their own form. So when I realized that, then okay, the site was the main thing to choose. So the first sem was about researching about the buildings, studying the proportions, and this all fiasco drawings.
So how much time were you on site?
I went twice, both 1 week, 1 week. Yeah.
Questions? Anybody?
Hey, hello. Yeah, beautiful sketches. And also, I was just keen on Fatehpur Sikri being, something which is a great structure or a space. um, how did you told us that you came about a program and that the program was needed like right beside. How did you know you need a light museum right beside the Fatehpur Sikri structure? Uh, like how did you deduce through the programs also? What became the idea of organize the somewhat the form has came out nicely from your structures, but I think how did the form came out to be all together stitched into one thing?
Yeah.
This kind of.
So basically, I was tracing a lot of plans, putting traces on like Louis Kahn's plans or Alvaro Alto's plans. I was tracing them.
I can see the.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So basically, finding some logic because Ando's autobiography had it. There's a book conversation with students. He had it that he used to trace Corp's plan and then he used to transcend them into his own vocabulary in some way. So I tried that thing out, and okay, then it's pretty. There's no niche way of 1 + 1 = 2. You have to put everything on the board. You have to see whatever you have, and then you have to sit and look at and stare at it. Okay, this can be worked out. You have to fix on something. Okay, condition A. This can be worked out. This can be worked out. This can be worked out. Okay, this is not working out. You try a model. Okay, this can be worked out. This can be worked out. Okay, overall is it stitching together? Okay, this doesn't make sense. So
Puzzle.
let's stop. Yeah.
Yeah, I think everybody goes through that phase of trial and error. Any more questions? See, this afternoon time session is always everybody's sleep mode.
Okay. Thank you, Shantanu. Thank you so much. So that brings us to the end of the third edition of the Thesis Forum. Please don't stand up. We have certificates for our participants and a small token of appreciation from EDSR. So can we have our participants up front, please? Everyone. Disha, Shreyas, Dhruv, Ameya, Neha. Come. Prasad, Shantanu, can we have you in front? Vaibhavi unfortunately had to leave early. Just mind the wire. So step onto the other side.
That they have already.
Yeah, just put it on. Thanks. Okay, so we have, what is the first name? Disha Niyogi. Dhruv Sachala. Vaibhavi, Amaya, can you collect it for her? She said she'll take it from me. So that's for Vaibhavi Khedkar. Prasad Parab, thank you. All our speakers from session 1. We have session 2. Shreyas Kulkarni. Neha Dalvi. Ameya Thanawala. And Shantanu Mure. Shantanu, everybody who comes up with, I want to draw, I'm sending them to you. Thank you so much. It was a wonderful day today. Anybody wants to say anything to the participants? I think it was a very informative, very interesting session where we got to know how people stumbled upon ideas and then eventually turned them into projects that were even more interesting than where they started off from. Any comments? Anything you'd like to say? I'm sure they want to have one-to-one conversations. Most of you all have drawings pinned up. So if you could end it by all standing with your panels, and people who want to speak to you could probably speak to you on a one-to-one level. I think that becomes easier for a lot of people. Thank you everyone for being here for the thesis forum. I hope to see you here again next year. Thanks a lot for being part of this conversation.